it has changed a whole lot since my time. Back when, in my time of coming up at like these children's here, we had to do old hard slaving work for the white people, because we didn't have any other choice, because we lived in their houses, and they just took full control of us. I would say they took control of us because we lived in their houses. But once the black people woke up and went to doing stuff for themselves, they couldn't do us like they once had did us. They come to their senses. See, we would be sitting like this evening, we'd be sitting out in their houses, sitting out talking or something. One may drive up in the yard and tell you to come on, go down here and go haul some hay Sunday evening. But that's just the way it was. So today, it's not like that. They can't come up now and say, come on and go out here and get on this truck to go to the hay field, because we ain't our own. Back in 1966, over on the Jones place from where y'all were today at the church, on down the road from there, it was a wood, just was a settlement of black people lived over there. But they was on the white man's plantation. And they had to do what he said do. But when the civil rights movement came into the county, that made a whole big difference. They didn't come up, and they didn't have the nerve to come up face to face and tell you had to get out of their houses. They would go home and write you a letter and give you so many days to be gone, and would tell you on that letter, I want my house for hay. You is no longer needed. That's the way they did us. Water in the wells, which is free. They didn't even want us to get water from their wells. We had to go down through the woods and ditches, what you call a spring, and drink water from a spring. That's the way the white people did here in these parts of the country. But it's better now. People had to go to work before day, milking cows to try to survive, to have food for their children and their families. Before day in the morning, it was so cold outside, you didn't need to be out there. But we had that to do. But now we don't have that to do. We live in these houses now. They may not be much, but they are ours. And we won't walk out there. We don't walk outside and see a sign say for sale, you got to go. So I feel good of it. I feels good.
I'd like to say good evening to everyone. I'm speaking on behalf of myself and anybody that would agree, and of course to those that will disagree will. So that's not to do to control that. My heart is sad. No, saddening is the word. My heart is drugged. I know that people are sick of hearing about James Byrd Jr. But we got drugged into it. We didn't ask for it. We got drugged into it, just like we got drugged into this. When this happened at the city, we had nothing to do with it, but it was mentioned. We got drugged into it. But we say no to drugs. I say no to being drugged. I never thought I would live to tell stories that my ancestors tell. I sit down with my children and have stories of, and I'm kind of afraid to kind of let go of them a little bit, because it's scary. But if you haven't been there, then you can't relate, and I can't make you relate. But I do want to say, we talked about the fence last time. The fence. If everybody turn around and look down the middle, yeah. I think they put it up in here. Yeah. But they said it was removed. Let's think about it. I'm sick. No, sick again. That's not the word. Tired of being drugged. What are we going to do? What are we going to do? The council room is divided. The door that's now open for executive session was closed a few months ago. Drug off the agenda a few months ago. anything we wanted to talk about was drugged off the agenda. Why? But this is not a race issue.
Good evening. Thank you for joining us. I'm Bill Leger. Kelly is off tonight. The Jasper City Council met behind closed doors tonight and then decided to fire Jasper Police Chief Rodney Pearson effective immediately. The council was set to evaluate both the city manager and the police chief at tonight's meeting. They decided to evaluate the city manager next month. The council voted 4-1 to terminate Pearson. Alton Scott was the only one opposed. After the vote, Scott said, quote, "This is racism at its finest." 6 News reporter Megan Dillard was at the meeting and says that many people at the meeting left outraged and upset. Elections in May put several new people on the city council. They replaced council members who supported Pearson. Chief Pearson was hired April 22nd of last year. Pearson says during his tenure, the department has done a good job of fighting crime and patrolling the community. Pearson is the first black police chief in Jasper. Megan will have more on this story tomorrow morning here on Channel 6.
I'm amazed at how easily offended people have become. Well, I don't mind telling you, I was raised with the word nigger, but it had no negative connotation in my life. I was raised to respect people by age, not by color. When the word nigger was used, it was just used as to describe a black person. I didn't even know it was a unacceptable word, or shall we say politically incorrect, until somebody said, well, you're not supposed to say nigger, you're supposed to say negro. Well, I've never learned to say the word that way, or African American.
Never really said it to the face, It was always, you and I'd be talking and we'd say something about that nigger, something. And, well, if I say it now around my children, which are, they're young adults, ooh, you use the N word, you're not supposed to do that. But it wasn't meant derogatory.
There's blacks and whites, and there's Mexicans, and they all play together at our school, so there's really nobody racist.
Take your hand.
This is where everybody gets along?
Yeah, there's 2 or 3 black girls in our class, and we're all friends with them, and there's a little Mexican boy in the class beside us, and we're friends with him, so...
And in my house, and our children, we never let the word nigger be used. Once we had children, we didn't say it and didn't use it because it was offensive. I still haven't come to grips or been able to understand it. Of course, it's like so many other things that have changed since I was a teenager, I guess, or a child, that I don't understand.
As evil and barbaric as it was, I believe the death of James Byrd Jr. may accomplish what could have never accomplished in his lifetime. That is better racial unity in Jasper. Because of Mr. Byrd, for the first time in the history of Jasper, members of all races have come together for the common good of this town.
The cows, Gus T Renegade, Justice, in for another program, hopefully to share constructive information on the system of racism, what it is, and how it works. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in to the program. Today's date would be Monday, July 9th, 2012. The sound clips that you heard to begin the program from a variety of different sources, really quickly, just so people have a little more information. The first and last sound clips that you heard, the older black female talking about her experience and how the white people would come and say, you got to come and pick hay, and would not allow them to get well from the water, as well as the final clip where the pastor was talking about how the victim of racism, white supremacy, James Byrd Jr., how his death had helped to improve race relations in Jasper, Texas. Those 2 clips are from the documentary film S.U.D., S-U-D. The American translation would be South. It's from an Austrian filmmaker, Chantal Ackerman. She, obviously, residing in Austria, other side of the planet. She was coming to the States to do a documentary film on William Faulkner, and she was coming during the late 90s, and at the time that she came, it was big news story, the murder of James Byrd Jr., And she was so impacted by that story that she totally changed her documentary and decided to focus on what happened in Jasper. And she went to the town and spoke with a lot of people, and those were some of the segments from that film. You can check it out. Very powerful film. The second clip, they have the Jasper City Council meetings. A lot of them are online, so you can watch the actual meetings and see what transpired. One of the citizens in Jasper, black female, she got up to voice her thoughts and saying that she was not sad. She was tired of being drugged. That was from one of the city council meetings in June around the incident that we're going to discuss. And then obviously one of the news reports about what has happened with former Chief of Police Rodney Pearson. Joining us today to get more information about all this, and I guess we'll all be a lot more informed about this small town just about 130 miles away from Houston, Texas, Jasper, Texas. Our guest for today's broadcast, he practices law with his father, David Byrd, in Beaumont, Texas. He handles personal injury cases, is a member of the Jefferson County Bar Association, and serves as treasurer of the Jefferson County Young Lawyers Association. He is representing Mr. Rodney Pearson in the legal aspect of the fight for justice, his claims that he has been mistreated and wrongfully terminated as the former chief in Jasper, Texas. Real pleasure to have him on the program. Unfortunate circumstances, but pleasure to have him on the program to get more information about this case. We are appreciative that he could spend some of his Monday evening with us, joining us live, Mr. Cade Bernsen. Mr. Bernsen, are you with us?
Yes, I am. Thank you. It's an honor to be on your show.
Thank you. We appreciate you taking some of your time out. I know you are super busy to speak with us. For folks, just so they have a little bit better understanding of who you are and the work that you do, if you want to give us some more background information, that would be great.
Yeah, sure. My name is Cade Bernsen. I'm a lawyer in Beaumont, Texas. I work with my dad, David Bernsen. My dad's a former state senator from this area, former chairman of the Texas Department of Transportation. Big Democrats, were, very active politically in this area, and I've always been my dream to be a lawyer, and grew up watching my dad try cases and fighting for people, and it's been a huge blessing to be able to get into law school, make it out, and get a license. And I've just, we've got me and my dad and two other lady lawyers that work with us here at the Bernsen Law Firm in Beaumont. And, that's how we got here. And we were approached by the chief of police, Pearson, and his wife, and they said they needed, about a year ago, and they said they needed help and that they were drowning. And so once they told us about the circumstances that were going on, I told my dad, it's a true story, I said, Dad, this is why I went to law school. This isn't exactly what we do. We really weren't, handling much civil rights cases at the time, but or many civil rights cases at the time, but I said, this is why I went to law school. A case like this, I mean, it's a righteous cause, and so we said we would stand with the chief and his wife, and here we are now a year later, and a ton of stuff has happened. So that's how we're here.
We will get some of the details, the sound clips, I think, that just scraping the surface in terms of things that have been going on the last year or so. Yeah. I guess before we get started, you are a white man, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. This program, the C.O.W.S, Context of White Supremacy, I have unfortunately concluded that what is responsible for incidents like what happened to Mr. James Byrd Jr., these sorts of things, what's producing them is a global system of racism, white supremacy. I use those two terms, racism and white supremacy, as synonyms and I use the same definition for both terms, racism and white supremacy. The definition that I use is as follows: a global system of people who classify themselves as white and are dedicated to abusing and or subjugating everyone in the known universe whom they classify as not white. Do you believe that such a system exists, and do you think that's an accurate definition?
I think that there's no doubt in my mind that racism exists. I think that there are racist. Racism is wrong regardless if it's white on black, black on brown. I think there's racists in every class of people, unfortunately. But the history of the United States, unfortunately, has a bad. There's some blemishes on our record, and especially in the South, and I don't think it's people that say that racism doesn't exist anymore are either in denial or they're just ignorant, because I don't think Jasper is the only place that this kind of behavior is going on, and I think you're seeing a lot of it with President Obama, people attacking him and not accepting him as a president. And so, yeah, I definitely think there's people out there, whether it's, they've been bred that way or whatever, that they think they're better than other folks. And they have, we've seen it in the South. I'm reading a really good book called Freedom Summer right now, talking about the SNCC and COFO people that came down with all the students, came down to Mississippi in 1964 to try to register people to vote. I'm sure you're very familiar with that period of time. And yeah, they were fighting back then to let people have dignity, let them be able to register to vote. And and like my dad said, he grew up in a time when he says, I remember it was black, colored water fountains, white water fountains, people that, it's not that far, we're not that far removed from that period of time. And there are people here, there are people unfortunately up in Jasper that still think that way. And so, yeah, I think your definition is pretty, I'm not a dictionary, so I don't know. I'm not an expert, but I think there are certainly people out there. I think it's widespread. It's not just in Jasper, Texas, obviously. You see it around the world, people that treat others horribly based on race and do abominable things to them based on race. And unfortunately, throughout the course of history, I think it's undeniable that black people have been the targets of a lot of that hatred. And unfortunately, I think it still exists.
All righty. Yeah, I think that speaks for itself. I want to make sure I forgot one of these sound clips. Okay. I missed the documentary, Two Towns of Jasper. That was important. I'm going to reference that a little later, but that was the segment where you heard the white family, their discussion around the use of the term nigger, and the daughter, she was talking about how there's a Mexican boy in her class and everybody gets along. That was from Two Towns of Jasper, also a documentary film on what happened during the proceedings with James Byrd Jr. They even cover some of the court proceedings as well. So Two Towns of Jasper and Sue, the two documentary films that you heard. All right. I've referenced James Byrd Jr. repeatedly. For folks who do not know, James Byrd Jr., black male, he was given a ride by some white people that were openly racist white supremacists. They had racist white supremacist tattoos. These folks were not hiding their views on white supremacy racism. They gave this black male a ride, ultimately assaulted him, chained him to the back of their pickup truck, dragged him a considerable distance, while he was still alive and fighting. He was ultimately decapitated. They dumped his remains after they brutally murdered him. This happened in 1998. Two of the assailants were convicted and given the death penalty. Lawrence Russell Brewer, he was executed on September 21st, 2011, which ironically is the same day that Troy Davis was executed in Georgia. The other assailant who also received the death penalty, John King, he's still on death row. He has appeals. The third assailant, he did not get the death penalty. He received life in prison. He's still in greater confinement. This case has been brought up over and over again in association with your client, Rodney Pearson. There are a lot of folks that I've heard, Mayor Lout, who has said, hey, the James Byrd case that happened 14 years ago, it's tragic, it's unfortunate. The perpetrators, they were punished. They're in jail. One of them has been executed. One of them is on death row right now. That has absolutely nothing to do with what we're talking about with former Chief Rodney Pearson. What are your thoughts around why that case, or is that case? Do you think that what happened with Mr. Byrd is relevant at all to your client?
Sure it is. You said several things there. So sure it is, because you can't look at what's happening in Jasper in a vacuum, okay? You have to look at it through the lenses of time and the lenses of history. So people that realize where we are, where we're talking about, we're not on the moon somewhere. This is Jasper, Texas, in the deep east woods of Texas, and it unfortunately has a bad history when it comes to race relations. And so absolutely. In fact, one of the council people that just fired the chief is the uncle of Sean Berry, who is one of the three murderers of James Byrd. He's the one that got the life sentence. The other two guys got the death penalty. So his uncle is one of the white city council people that just fired Pearson. So it's a lot of irony in this deal. And the fact is that the first group of citizens who brought up made the James Byrd Jr. reference were this group of white folk who this one lady put on her Facebook page that the hiring of the first black chief of police by this black council was going to create a stink in Jasper greater than the James Byrd ordeal. Okay, so they brought it up, they brought Byrd into it, and so yeah, and it's relevant. The irony in this case, you could write a book about it. Maybe we will. That Chief Pearson, who's my client, the first black chief of police in Jasper's history, was the highway patrolman who actually found the body of James Byrd Jr. after he had been murdered 14 years ago. So the irony, can you believe that? I mean, he was the first responder that took the call and found the body and helped identify Sean Berry, because they found those tools that had his name engraved on them. And so you fast forward that 14 years, and he becomes the first black police chief, and a group of all-white citizens managed to run him off and recall the black city council that hired him. So yeah, I mean, unfortunately, it's James Byrd Jr. is part of the history of Jasper, and race relations in Jasper still have a lot of room for healing. But the problem is, like one of the local ministers told me, for healing to take place, you first have to have the other group acknowledge that they've done something wrong. How can healing take place unless they apologize? And they're not going to do that. And so, unfortunately, we're having to resort to the court system to seek justice for our client.
Wow.
I know that's a lot to chew on, but
wow. Man, I've been saying that since I spoke with you on Saturday. I was telling our listeners, like, I don't even know where to begin with this case. It's so, a book, films. I mean, you've already had 2 documentaries. You could just keep making films on this little itty bitty town. Population is less than 10,000 people. Is that accurate?
Absolutely. But I mean, I'd be glad to just give you the high points of what happened to the chief if you want, or whatever you want to do.
Okay, I want to get that as well. Just to ask, because I've heard several people, and some of them black people, have said that they didn't think Mr. King and Mr. Brewer, they didn't think any of the perpetrators in the case against Mr. Byrd, they didn't think any of them should have received the death penalty. As an attorney, did you think the death penalty was warranted in that case?
Oh man, I'm still trying to grapple with the death penalty on a philosophical level. When actually I had Dick Gregory, who's obviously is a famous civil rights activist and comedian. He came in and we went. I drove him up to have a rally in Jasper, and we went to Huntsville where he actually fasted for 24 hours to protest the death penalty of I forget which one they executed. It was the same day as Troy Davis, and so I think that I'm not sure where I stand on the death penalty. I'll tell you this: if anyone deserved the death penalty, it was these people. The reason I struggle with it is because inevitably, with the death penalty, innocent people are put to death. Hence, Troy Davis, who was probably innocent. But if anybody deserved the death penalty, these people were evil. They were unrepentant. They killed a man with no reason, other than the fact that he's black and he was in the wrong place at the wrong time. So, I think that's evil. That's completely evil. So, if anyone deserved it, they did.
I am very familiar with Dick Gregory. He's been a guest on our program a couple times, and we actually, about a year ago, just before Mr. Brewer was executed, we had Mr. Gregory on to discuss his thoughts about the case, and certainly his view that he didn't think they should have received the death penalty. In the archives, folks, if you want to check that out, back June of about a year ago, almost a year to the day, man.
Small world,
isn't it? Quickly, Mr. Berry, if you know, Mr. Berry was reported he was friends with James Byrd Jr. Is that accurate to your knowledge?
I don't know that. I don't know.
Okay.
I think they knew each other, but I'm not sure if they were friends or not. I know he was the only one that got a life sentence instead of the death penalty. So but I'm not exactly sure why.
Okay. No worries. Okay. Getting your client, Mr. Rodney Pearson, black male, first black chief of police in Jasper, Texas. If you want to take us back to last year, because I remember seeing reports where this became controversial, like immediately about a year ago this time. I was seeing reports. In fact, website does a lot of great work, racismdaily.com. They were reporting that there were white males, Michael G. McConnell, filing lawsuits immediately and saying that they felt this was discrimination, that Mr. Pearson was not qualified, he shouldn't have been hired as chief in the first place, and that you had white candidates who were much more qualified who did not get hired just because they were white. What were your thoughts on how this all started?
How the whole thing started, or about those white guys filing the claims?
Let's start with the white people filing the claims.
Well, what happened is, once I think their claims were bogus, that the mayor and some other folks within the city structure attempted to change, or they did. They actually changed the qualifications for the criteria for becoming a police chief, and tried to change it to criteria that had never been used before in the history of Jasper, in an attempt to discredit the chief They also implemented a scoring system that was not approved by the Black City Council, to a scoring system that was weighted heavily against the chief, to where he did not get credit for having spent 21 years as a dedicated officer with the Texas Department of Public Safety as a state trooper, which is one of the most prestigious law enforcement organizations in the country. So the scoring system was skewed to where he wouldn't get points for that, but if you were a police officer from, a town with 1,000 people in it, that you would somehow get more points than he would. So I think that the evidence is going to show that this was done purposely to discredit him and to attempt to try to keep him from being hired. But the city council chose him anyway, and so those people that filed those complaints, I think they were wrong. I think they were bogus. I think that as the litigation continues, we will gladly compare Chief Pearson's resume to former chiefs of police and to the applicants who applied and were denied the position. And so we look forward to being able to do that, because I think there's no doubt in my mind he was the most qualified person for the job, and that he did the best he could with the little support that he had while he was chief.
Wow. So these qualifications that were changed, you talked a little bit about the scoring system. Were there other specifics that were changed with regards to the criterion that they were using to judge the candidates to see who was most qualified?
Well, first of all, they had never used a scoring system ever. To my knowledge, they've never used a scoring system like the one they used. And somebody, and we still got to figure this out because a lot of people are pointing the finger at each other. What I do know is that the city council at the time was four blacks and one white. They never voted on a scoring system. They never approved one. Somehow this brand new scoring system appears, okay, and then it's used as a basis to try to say that the chief's not qualified. And the interesting thing about this case is, one of the interesting things is that the mayor, I think I told you this, the mayor owns the only radio station in town, the only large radio station. There's a couple Christian radio stations as I understand it, but he owns the big one called KJAS. And so he would use this radio station to attack the chief and attack the Black City Council people. But and to answer your question, the scoring system had never been used before. It's never, so I think that was purposely put in place to try to discredit the chief. And the actual, I think the evidence is going to end up showing that the requirements, the job posting requirements before the chief took the position were changed in order to try to keep him out as well. And so we think the evidence is very strong that will show that whether it's the mayor or his underlings, whoever it was, somebody attempted to implement a scoring system never used before and tried to change the criteria that every other chief in Jasper's history has had to abide by. They changed it for him to try to keep him out.
Willful acts.
Well, no, absolutely. It shows the intent. They then did a background check on the chief, very in-depth, hired a firm to do this background check, interview, going back through his life with a fine-tooth comb for 20 years. As I understand it, none of the other candidates that applied for the position had this background check done, which is obviously purposeful in my mind. It's discrimination. They then take that background check where they went and interviewed his former employers, his family members, stuff like that. They took it and they released it to the public, unredacted. and it had his Social Security number in it. It had his family's names in it. And as we're researching the law, they violated several statutes by releasing this information like that. That there's, you know, special protections that are put in place for law enforcement personnel and their families, and they violated all that, putting all his private information out there for the world to see. And so it was just a series of things. They never gave him a swearing-in ceremony. He's the only chief we know of that has never. They swore him in a back room. They would not even let his wife be there, nor his family. He's got like 6 siblings. You know, all the normally when you know how it is when you become a chief of police, that's a big deal. You usually have a ceremony with balloons, cookie cake, whatever. Have people take photos, swear him in, da-da-da. They took him in a back room, made him swore him in. No family member was allowed to be there, and that was his swearing-in ceremony. And it just got worse from there. You know, they attacked him and his family. He's married to a white woman, which makes things even more interesting. A blonde-haired, blue-eyed white woman who's super nice. They have, you know, a mixed family, white children and black children, and I think that there were some people in town that didn't like that very much. So as soon as the day he took office to the day he was fired, he had a target on his back. And not only that, but as we've alluded to, the black city council people that hired him were recalled. It was the first recall in the history of Jasper. So they managed to take the council out, and they managed to fire him. So it's a huge mess.
I use my mute button liberally during all the programs, and I've been muted most of the time because I've just been at times just shouting, and I mean it's unbelievable just to hear the record of all of this. In my view, willful, terroristic, white supremacist conduct. And I just wanted to remind folks, which a very important detail, you said the uncle of one of the perpetrators against James Byrd Jr. Was a part of the council that voted to fire Rodney Pearson. Just very important detail for folks who say that these incidents are not connected and, you know, we shouldn't be bringing that up anymore. I also, and this goes back to last year, as I said, I've been seeing news reports about this incident for about a year now around the controversy with the hiring of Mr. Pearson. Some of the white people who have filed complaints, and they began putting their complaints in a year ago and saying that they were discriminated against because they're white and that the only reason Mr. Pearson was hired in the first place is because he's black. I read in one of the reports where they said that Pearson demoted 3 officers and promoted 1 more, and by May 27th, 2 of the demoted officers had filed a grievance with the department, according to Jasper Newsboy Archives. Have you seen a pattern of this sort of vindictive behavior where you said he's got a target on his back?
No, yeah, absolutely. You know, he came into office, and just like if a president takes office, as you know, or a governor or whatever, you surround yourself with people that are going to support you and back you up, especially in law enforcement when your life could be on the line, something of that nature. So when he took over, he made some personnel changes, and he moved the current captain to a different position and hired another captain who was a white guy. He's a really nice guy, named Curtis Frames, a really nice guy. And he made some other departmental moves. Well, this was just, you know, intolerable for some of these people, you know. And the thing is, as you know, that throughout the history of the South, that the position of sheriff and chief of police is a very, very symbolic position. It is a position that, unfortunately, throughout history, anyone that has studied the South and studied the Civil Rights Movement, they know that sheriffs and chiefs of police were part of the problem. They were part of the. They were used as instruments of oppression against black folks, and so it was very, very symbolic and meaningful for the people in Jasper, with its history, especially, to get a black chief of police. But unfortunately, this idea of a black man with a badge and a gun and authority just did not sit well with some people. And they can say what they want, but the people, they can say what they want about their reasonings, but the people that know Jasper, that and this, the various ministers that we've been working with who've been trying to fight for the chief and fight for the council, they know what this is about. And, it's been a nightmare for the chief and his family. It has been a literal nightmare for him.
I want to get to some of the commentary, because you told me about Mayor James Lout. Mike Louts, thank you. He has the radio station in Jasper, major radio station, and he has not been a supporter of Rodney Pearson. He's been against him, I guess from day one, it seems. He has a Facebook page for their radio program, and people have just been commenting out of the yin-yang. I assume a lot of these folks are white people. Some of them have photographs. I wanted to read, because some of them, they have cited their grievances, right? They've said that they're not racist, that anyone who's calling them racist, you're wrong, you don't know your facts. If you just look at the information, Pearson is not qualified. And some of them have, written out things that they feel evidence that Pearson didn't do a good job while he was chief. This is one person, and they wrote, you can read this for yourself. It's on the KJAS radio page on Facebook. You can just do a search for KJAS. This is Debbie Foster. The folks have been real proud about putting their name out too. She says that she's kept quiet for too long, but today I am mad. Let's all face the facts. Pearson had it made as chief. From the beginning, he didn't have to meet the requirements that were set forth by the city's job application. Actually, I want to go point by point with each of the things that she lists out as part of her grievance. So to your knowledge, did Rodney Pearson, did he meet the requirements that were set forth on the job application for chief of police in Jasper?
Before or after they changed it? First of all, Debbie Foster is the girlfriend of the mayor. Yeah. And she is one of she works for KJAS. She is an employee of KJAS Radio. So she's the mayor's girlfriend. I mean, this isn't me just speculating. Like, that's established. We had a federal hearing, injunction here, 3-day hearing to try to stop the recall petition, and that he admitted that on the stand. Yes, they've been dating for years, and she is one of his employees. So please take everything she says with a grain of salt. But the requirements he met. He is, like I said, he had what I'll say is he has better credentials than many of the former chiefs of police, more education, more law enforcement experience. They changed the requirements, but after it became apparent that the city council wanted to hire him, or were looking, were strongly looking at him. And so anyway, they tried to change the requirements, the educational requirements, and so on and so forth. And but again, they did not seek the council's approval. Nothing. There was no. The requirements were never changed in a proper official way as they were required to be, and so the council didn't abide by them because they were irrelevant. And as this litigation goes on, we're going to have to find out who in the city government authorized those changes, because no one will admit to it right now. But yeah, I think he was absolutely, he met the requirements that every other chief of police in Jasper's history has had to meet.
Okay. Next, she says that Mr. Pearson, that he got a $5,000 pay raise just a few months into the job, and that all other city employees have to wait 1 year. She says, is this, to your knowledge, is that accurate? And would that, count as something like, hey, he's not doing a good job, or a reason to terminate?
Well, it's not a reason to any pay raise he gets. How is that his fault? Any pay raise he gets is something that the city council does. And second of all, he was hired as the chief of police on an interim basis, basically meaning a temporary basis, when the previous chief of police retired or resigned. And then after he became interim is when they tried to change all the qualifications that were needed to become a chief of police, and they tried to implement this bogus scoring system. And basically, he became interim chief. He was interim for a couple months, and then they hired him as full-time chief. Well, they never upped his pay. He was still being paid on an interim basis for several months until they raised it to bring it up to the level that what a full-time chief would be making. And so that's the pay raise she's talking about, that she's so angry about. But what that was just getting him up to the level of what a full-time chief would make. And I think the evidence is going to show that former chiefs of police received pay raises, and no one ever has complained about it. So, that's that.
Okay. Next, she says that Mr. Pearson took the newest of the city vehicles from the street and had it painted at Jasper citizens' tax dollar expense for $7,000, which was never approved by city council. To your knowledge, is this true? Would this be reason for termination or in any way in violation of his duties?
That's the first I've heard of that one. I don't know about that. But what I do know is that the day they terminated him, this new city council, when they came in a few weeks ago, they never met with him, they never talked to him, they never expressed any displeasure with how he was running the place. They never provided him anything in writing talking about, these are some concerns we have, we want you to address them. Nothing. And the night that they fired him, he showed up. They didn't provide him any warning, anything in writing, and they basically had scripts. The white city council people and the mayor had scripts, literal scripts that you can see in the video they're reading from. They didn't give the black city councilman one, of course not. So it means that somebody met beforehand and got all that together, which raises some interesting questions about Open Meetings Act and stuff like that. And they basically, for 40-something minutes, or approximately 40 minutes, just peppered him with every question they could. They took the best shots at him they could. I don't think that's the first I've heard of that. So they tried to publicly humiliate him, and then during the same meeting, they took the white city manager, who's white, they took him behind closed doors to have his meeting, so not to embarrass him. So they made the chief do it in front of a standing room only crowd, whites on one side, blacks on the other, tried to publicly humiliate him, and then they took the white guy behind closed doors and had his meeting. Then they came out and they fired the chief. They never told him why they fired him. Never. To this day has anyone explained to him or given him anything talking about why they fired him. They made him go over and clean his office out at 10 o'clock at night after a 3-hour meeting. Said, you're going to go turn your badge in, turn your gun in, and made him and his son clean out his office at 10 at night. And so, they've never told him exactly why he's been fired. All they can do is just ramble. They just bring up random points, none of which I think are cause for termination. I mean, I know they're not. But I've never heard about the painting of the new car, but,
Wow. I can only tell listeners I'm muted. Man, I have been I mean, this is some of the most trifling behavior. If your account is accurate, this is some of the most trifling racist conduct that I've heard in some time. And we talk about racism every day. Okay, the next one. This is all Debbie Foster. She says that former Chief Pearson that he never put in a 40-hour work week. To your knowledge, is that accurate?
That's completely inaccurate. Again, this is Debbie Foster, the mayor's girlfriend and employee of KJAS Radio, the radio that was dedicated to attacking the chief for over a year, since from day one till now. But the chief doesn't have to clock in and clock out like a worker. He's the chief of police. Okay, and they tried to talk about this in the meeting, acting like he hasn't worked. The guy's a hard-working, dedicated professional who's dedicated his life to public service. 21 years with the Department of Public Safety, was promoted numerous times, and so the guy is, they're trying to make it sound like he's lazy or something. That's ridiculous. She has nothing to back that up. And that's just ridiculous. No, I mean, no one keeps track of his hours. So how they would come to that conclusion is mysterious to us.
Wow. You all can visit the website to read some of the other commentary. As I said, there are literally more than 100 comments. And it looks like to me just a lot of white people, I would say a lot of suspected racists, just making their commentary, some of them celebrating that Pearson was fired, and others just supporting his termination and saying that anyone who alleges that this has anything to do with racism, white supremacy is crazy, ignorant, doesn't know what they're talking about. The New York Times has covered this piece as well. CNN has got a lot of national attention. They covered this piece, and I wanted to get some of the details, because if this is accurate, this too would be pretty trifling, and to me would suggest that this might just be a lot of racism, white supremacy that has motivated all of the angst that Mr. Pearson has experienced. I'm not going to read the whole thing. I'm just giving context to read the beginning. It says, 3 weeks after Rodney Pearson became Jasper County's first black state highway patrolman, a lot of firsts here, he responded to a call from Jasper Country Club. As he pulled up to the clubhouse, his partner told him to wait. "You can't go in here," Mr. Pearson said his partner told him. "Just sit in the car." Only whites were allowed inside. It was 1992. Just for context. Now I'm going to skip down a little bit further, but I mean, even that in and of itself, black enforcement officer, and you are not allowed to enter the country club. No blacks allowed, even if you're an enforcement officer responding to a call. Moving forward. Now this, I mean, I don't even know what this, I will just read. In 2006, Mr. Pearson left the Texas Department of Public Safety to work for a company that sold fire trucks and equipment. He remained active in Jasper's civic life, becoming the town's volunteer fire chief in 2009. He and his wife Sandy enjoyed the small town where, he said, even as a quote-unquote interracial couple, they encountered zero trouble with racial tensions. Miss Pearson, who is white, said she would defend the town when outsiders brought up the stigma it has faced since Mr. Byrd's killing. Now that is fascinating. She said she now feels different. "I never realized in my life that people could have so much hate," Miss Pearson said. As residents organized to recall the council members who had appointed Mr. Pearson, the talk took a nasty turn. One image that made the rounds online was a photoshopped Trojan condom advertisement. Mr. Pearson's face appeared between pictures of President Obama and Michelle Obama and two black Jasper City Council members. Underneath it said, "Could things have turned out better had their parents listened?" Lance Caraway, a leader of the recall effort who created the image, says it was done in jest. "I like to poke fun," he said. "There's no dark, secret, heinous wish for anybody to die." What a statement. In quotes. Mr. Caraway also made a public Facebook posting after Mr. Pearson's appointment, what he referred to as his famous stupid nigger comment that offended members of the town's black community. He said that he regretted his word choice and that he was not a white pointy hat wearing racist. I will stop right there. Do you have any comments on any of the photograph, the nigger comment on Facebook, any of that?
Yeah, I mean, it's so ridiculously offensive. I'm glad that you cued in on that. I mean, it's offensive that, and it shows you the kind of atmosphere we're in. That a lot of these things were posted on the mayor's Facebook website, which is so inappropriate. And nobody called this guy out. They all laughed that this guy who owns the big gun store in town in Jasper, he nicknamed himself the Gunslinger. He feels comfortable. What's flabbergasted my father and me and other folks is that he feels comfortable enough saying these things because they don't get called out on it. There's no repercussions. The mayor's website, kjas.com, still, if you scroll down on the front page, you'll still see a little advertisement from the Gunslinger. That there's no financial repercussions, there's no repercussions, that he feels comfortable enough with the people he's surrounded by that he can talk like that and say those things, and nobody renounced him. And it gives you a glimpse into the atmosphere we're talking about. And then in the same time, they're friends with this guy on Facebook. Everyone's friends. He's one of the leaders of the all-white group who did the recall. And then they try to say, "Oh, but we're not racist. There's no racism here." So we're like, okay.
I just want to make sure I didn't misunderstand. Are you saying Lance Caraway? Lance Caraway, that's the person's name. Lance Caraway, who said, this is all in quotes too, leader of the recall effort who created this image, said it was done in jest and that he likes to poke fun. And then also, Lance Caraway quoted as saying, there's no dark, secret, heinous wish for anybody to die. Are you saying the same person who said all this owns a gun store in Jasper?
Yeah, I think the biggest gun store in Jasper. It's called the Gunslinger. If you go to KJS's front page, their home page, you'll see his advertisement, a little Gunslinger deal. He's a big advertiser with them. Yeah, that's pretty unsettling.
Just reminder why I thought it was important that clip that I played at the very beginning from Two Towns in Jasper, the segment where you hear the white family talking and they're complaining. At least that's what it sounds like to me. There's some sadness about the fact that we cannot use the term nigger anymore. This was 1999 when the film came out, complaining about the fact that they can't use the term nigger anymore and they don't really understand why they can't use this term anymore and their children fuss at them. Context, very important. Context that they would be having that discussion in the context of a film that's supposed to be about this heinous act of white terrorism where a black male was decapitated, and in the midst of all that you have white people complaining about the fact that they can't say nigger anymore. I would put that right next to Lance Caraway, the gunslinger, and his nigger commentary about Mr. Pearson, and then no dark, secret, heinous wish for anybody to die. I mean, you can't make this stuff up.
That's what we keep saying. You can't write this stuff.
You mentioned it, and the article mentioned that, which I think is incredibly important. Mr. Pearson, he's married to a white woman. They said they had not experienced any racial animosity prior to all this, him being appointed as chief in 2011, and that his wife said she would defend the town of Jasper if anyone tried to talk bad and say that, just a town full of racists because of what happened to Mr. Byrd. Do you know of any incidents or any specific attacks against Mr. Pearson's wife or any other family members, any sort of retaliation against other family folks for what he's gone through?
Well, I'm glad you mentioned that. The 3 or 4 weeks before the chief got fired, his wife was fired from her job. She was a office manager for a medical clinic in Jasper. She does not have a blemish on her record. Okay? They came in and said, we're going to have to let you go, you're fired. And she said, well, why? And they said, well, the only explanation they gave was because morale was low in the office place, quote unquote. And so after she worked there for 17 years, and they fired her with no explanation besides the low morale. And so can I prove that it's directly related? Probably not, but, we're not fools. People aren't fools. And if you'll talk to the CNN reporter, Deborah Fayerick, or the Texas Tribune has done some articles there. It's a group out of Austin, and the New York Times guy, Manny Fernandez, they'll tell you people are afraid to talk to him. There were numerous black folks that are like, man, I do not want to talk. I have to work here. I've got kids here, grandchildren here, and they're afraid to talk because of fears of retaliation, against economic retaliation, whatever. And so, yeah, I mean, his wife got fired. They have said just nasty rumors about him and his wife around town that I won't even repeat. But yeah, so they've been harassed and targeted. Their kid has come home crying from school because of mean things that people are saying at school. And so, yeah, I mean, they've been retaliated against and harassed for over a year. And my dad likes to use the analogy. She talks about the fact that before he was chief, none of this stuff was happening. It wasn't out in the open like this, but everything changed when he became chief of police. The guy that everybody liked and no one had a problem with, now this group hated him and said he's incompetent. He needed to go. And my dad uses the analogy, it's like that country club that there's a lot of country clubs that, if a black guy's in there and he's serving food or tending the bar, it's fine. That's absolutely fine. He can be in there. But as soon as that same black guy puts on a suit and tie and tries to walk through the front door wanting to be a member, then that's completely different. And I think that's what happened, that this guy who no one had a complaint about, blah, 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 he was a good highway patrolman, he was good enough to be the volunteer fire chief, this, and that, but all of a sudden he becomes the chief of police, that most symbolic of positions, and now he's incompetent, he's unqualified, and the council that hired him is incompetent. They're racist and da-da-da-da-da, and so, we got to recall them and fire the chief, and that's what they did.
Voltron in full effect, folks. Context of White Supremacy. Again, real pleasure to have on the program our guest, Cade Bernsen. I guess, number one, have you faced any sort of retaliation? Have they made any threats at you or any comments at you since you are representing Mr. Pearson?
They have a little bit. I mean, they talk about, they refer to me and my dad as outside agitators, which is funny because that's exactly what they called the students back in the 60s that were trying to register those voters. They would be like, a bunch of outsiders, agitators that we need to, they say that there's been numerous postings and stuff on Facebook where they say we're trying to use racism to our advantage and that we're trying to, bring up James Byrd Jr., for our political advantage, whatever that means. And, yeah, I mean, they take their little shots, calling us slimy lawyers and, stuff like that. And there have been some white folk we know that just say, why are y'all involved? Why are y'all doing this? Just stay out of it. No physical threats or anything like that, but we wear it as a badge of honor, I'm telling you. It makes me feel good. To fight for something you believe in, and fight an injustice, and so it makes me want to show up and come to work.
I guess also, because we just talking about some of the gripes that these folks have alleged against former Chief Pearson, the mayor, Mike Loud, he's also saying that I guess back in 1990, Mr. Pearson, he was arrested on a charge of writing a check with insufficient funds. In your view, does that qualify as grounds for termination and or a reason why he should not have been hired as chief in the first place?
Absolutely not. I mean, the guy, that was 20 years ago. He was like 19 or 20 years old, and he was married. And, like my mom says, unless you're just extremely wealthy, everybody at some point has written a check, that maybe didn't have enough funds in it. I mean, that's normal. Unfortunately, that happens. And he wasn't arrested. I don't know what the definition of arrested is. He went and he went to the station and said, "Look, I got to make this right," and they paid restitution. And I think that's funny that the mayor would bring up that when this is the same mayor who drove his car drunk into a fast food restaurant up onto the sidewalk and centered the car to where he couldn't get the car off of it, and then proceeded to take his shirt off and walk down the road, where he was picked up by law enforcement and given a public intoxication. He should have gotten a DWI like any one of us would have gotten. He ended up getting a public intoxication. And this is why he's mayor. This was like the year before the chief got selected. So, going to talk about, they need to be careful about tossing stones, throwing stones, and no, I don't think that, and the council was fully aware of that, of the hot check deal. I think it was a hot check for $10.55, and they were fully aware and had all that information at the time he was hired. And so, no, it's old news. It's not an issue. It has nothing to do. They don't want to. They want to talk about that, but they don't want to talk about the 20+ years he spent serving honorably with the DPS, and all the awards and commendations he got and promotions he got during that time. No one's perfect. We've all got issues and blemishes and things like that. But,
Man. As I said, this is one of the most trifling episodes of white terrorism, white supremacy that I've seen in a long time, and I study racism every day. I want to check to see if Justice, if she has any questions. I have found it's very important. I think sometimes some of the really ugly details get left out because people, they don't want to offend, or they just don't want to continue to spread or repeat really crude commentary or incidents. And I think that is important because I think it provides more evidence for what we're dealing with, and it provides more evidence for how serious the problem is. If you could share like some of the commentary that's going around, some of the racist commentary that's going around that's being directed about Mr. Pearson and his wife, that I think would be extremely helpful.
Well, there's been rumors that they put on there that his wife got fired because she was embezzling money. They've heard that. Said hurtful thing, which is just absolutely ridiculous. They've spread rumors that the chief's having affairs with people and and just mean-spirited stuff like that. Just mean-spirited stuff like that. Just attacking the reputation of his wife. Saying that she embezzled money. Blah, 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 it's not true. Talking about the chief, extramarital affairs, things like that. What else have they said? I can't, it's so much stuff. But that's an example of some of the stuff.
Okay. Justice, if you have some questions for attorney Cade Bernsen, your line should be open. Please feel free.
Hello?
Yes, ma'am.
Hello?
Okay. Just wanted, okay. Is it, okay, yeah, hello to the guest. And,
Hello.
Hi, I have a few questions for you. Why do
Can you
think,
speak up, please?
Yeah, it's the phone. I'm sorry about that. Is it better?
That's better.
Okay. Why do you think James Byrd, Jr. was dragged from the back of a truck?
Oh, wow. I don't know. I think he was in the wrong place at the wrong time, and I think that, unfortunately, those people just, I don't know, they were drunk or high or whatever, and they just hated. They had some racist motivations behind it. That's a great question. I don't know if it's the most senseless. It was the most senseless crime you can think. I mean, it happens all the time, I guess, senseless crimes. But I mean, it's just a senseless crime. I mean, it wasn't about robbing money. It wasn't about, I don't know if there's a good answer to that. I mean, it sounds like there were just racist motivations, and it was just evil. So I don't really know if there's a good answer to that. I'm sorry.
Did the white people that murdered Mr. Byrd go to jail or got in trouble? If so, what was the case?
Yes, there was 3 men. Two of them got the death penalty. One of them was just executed this year, and one guy's still on death row, and the other guy has a life sentence.
Why do you think white people fired Mr. Pearson?
I think they were responding to pressure from a small but very vocal group in the community that did not like the idea of a black man being a chief of police.
Do you think white people should be mistreated the way how white people mistreat non-white people?
Wait, say that again?
Do you think white people should be mistreated the way how white people mistreat non-white people?
No, I don't. I think you should, treat people with dignity and respect. And if you don't agree with, you don't agree with somebody on their politics or a particular issue, that's one thing. That's what debate is about. You can debate. You can have intense disagreements, but you don't mistreat people. You don't use racial slurs. And no, you don't. I personally wasn't raised that way, so no, I don't think we're supposed to. I don't think it's supposed to as Christians, and I don't think we're supposed to as human beings, no matter what your faith. You're supposed to treat people with dignity and respect, and if you disagree, do so, but do it in a polite manner. So no, I don't think you should.
How do you think black people should respond when incidents like this happen? And when I say like this, I mean the James Byrd incident and the Mr. Pearson. And Mr. Pearson being fired within a year.
I think that's why I agreed to do this radio show. It's 7:30 here in Texas, and I'm still at work doing this because the only way to stop behavior like this, as was the case during the Civil Rights Movement in the 50s and the 60s, in the 70s, and I don't think the Civil Rights Movement's over yet. I think we're still fighting it right now. But the way to do it is to shed light on it. I've been told that if you turn the lights on, the cockroaches will scramble. And so, I would encourage your listeners to contact CNN, contact MSNBC, contact their papers and say that they want coverage of this story, because the more pressure we put on these people, the likelihood, it reduces the likelihood that they'll repeat these actions, because when it happens in these small towns all over the country, when behavior like this goes on and no one talks about it, no one calls them out on it, and so it just continues to repeat itself over and over again. So now, by doing this radio show and by getting some stories in the national press, we're putting pressure on them. You basically have to shame them. You have to shame them into changing, because otherwise it won't happen.
Why do white people, suspected white supremacists, try to cause a lot of conflict?
I have no clue. Just hate in their hearts.
What is the Jefferson County Bar Association, and what do they do?
It is an association that lawyers that reside here in Jefferson County belong to. And it provides services for people in the county, and is a way for lawyers to stay connected with one another and socialize and things like that.
If an enforcement official is accusing you of something that you didn't do, what should you do?
Do what now?
Okay, so if an enforcement official, the police, is accusing you of something that you didn't do, what should you do in that situation?
I would get an attorney.
Okay, what if they, what if they start getting physical with you?
I don't think you should ever argue. The best case is just not to argue with the police, not to try to work it out, Don't try to make a situation worse. I would just follow their instructions, and then at appropriate time, I'd seek counsel to get to protect your rights.
How have people threatened to kill Mr. Pearson?
Not that I'm aware of.
How do you think the system of white supremacy can be eliminated?
I don't know if it can ever be eliminated totally, but, prayer and activism through the political process, standing up to it when it pops its ugly head up. We got to stand up and say that we're not going to tolerate this kind of behavior, and try to shed light on it so that people realize what's going on.
Thank you for answering my questions, and I'm glad that you actually came on the program, because because I think that you are sharing a lot of constructive information on the two incidents that happened to James Byrd and Mr. Pearson.
You're welcome. Thank you very much.
Mm-hmm.
Context of White Supremacy. If any of the folks, if you're listening, if you have a question you want to ask Mr. Byrd to get anything cleared up, the number to dial is 760-569-7676, and the code is 564-943#. If you're on that line and you have a question, it's *6. I know we have a lot of listeners down in Texas. If you're on the TalkShoe line, it is *8. With the council meetings, and again, I would encourage folks, if you are interested, if you want to get more details, you can look on YouTube. A lot of the council meetings, they're online. They've been posting them. You can watch some of them. They got the whole meeting up. You can watch and get details. Quite a few, if you look for the June ones, they're talking about this incident, what's been going on with Mr. Pearson. The meeting where they actually called Mr. Pearson in, you said they had the black people on one side, the white people on the other side. Did they have a closed meeting at any point where the public did not have access, where any of the details were talked about with regards to terminating Mr. Pearson?
Yeah, they went into executive session for some part of that time, and so that's closed to that's closed to the public.
Okay. Was that where the actual move to terminate him took place, or was that where everyone was present?
No, they did that. They did that in public.
Okay. The person 8286, if you had a question for Mr. Pearson, your line should be open. Excuse me, Mr. Byrd, got my names confused.
Sorry.
Oh, no, I'm still trying to formulate my question. You can go ahead. That's okay.
Okay. While you're formulating your question, also, we really haven't touched too much on it, but the 4 black people who were recalled, the council members?
It was three.
3, okay. The 3 members that were recalled in that process, what explanation did they give for recalling those 3 black members?
All the petition said was it was for incompetence and, I believe, malfeasance. They listed 3 just very general reasons for the recall: incompetence, malfeasance, nonfeasance. I forget something else. Very, very general. Basically saying that they had appointed an incompetent chief or something like that. I don't. They never were given a very good explanation for that.
Wow. I thought it was 4-1, unless I'm
right. One of the guys retired before the recall, so there was only 3 of them that had actually voted on the chief. And those were the 3 that were recalled.
Okay. Wow. And you said that was the first time that's ever happened, where they've had council members.
To my understanding, that's the first recall in Jasper's history.
Wow. And directly tied to, did they cite any other acts that they carried out that they felt were negligent, other than them choosing to hire Chief Pearson?
No.
Wow.
No, these people had never, some of these people had been on the council for some time, and their representation and leadership had never been questioned or challenged before.
Wow.
Until they picked him.
When I hear complaints about enforcement officers, or really anyone who is a public official, particularly if it's dealing with police officers, they will cite crime. Something's happening where crime rates have spiked. There have been botched investigations where we've lost major court cases against criminals, where there have been acquittals, where someone committed a crime, and something happened with the investigation where criminals are being allowed to roam free. In all the reports that I've heard, that I've read, I have not seen anything that has alleged that while Mr. Pearson was chief, there was an actual problem with policing. Have you seen anything where they've actually, raised concerns about, hey, we've had a crime problem since he was chief, or things haven't?
No, and like I said, he still hasn't ever received anything explaining why he was fired.
Wow. Standard. The caller 8286, did you kind of have some time to get your question together, or?
Yes.
Okay.
Can I be heard?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. I just wanted to ask the guests, in your response to Justice just moments ago, you had made an indication or a comment in saying that we needed to try and shine a light on instances like this in order to shame people who participate in these type of behaviors. But my question was, do you think that black people have already, quote, shined a light on the issues for far too long? Do you think perhaps maybe it's just something within the culture of America itself to be what it is?
That's pretty deep. No, I mean, I think when injustices happen, you have to shine a light on it. You have to call it out and expose it, or it just perpetuates itself. And so, I'm sure some people get weary of hearing about things like this, but the reality is that bad stuff still happens. And so you're confronted with, well, do I say something about it and try to stop it, or do I just look the other way? And I don't think we should look the other way. I think we, as a society and as human beings and as brothers and sisters, we have to do the best we can to expose injustice when it occurs and to fight it, stand up for what we believe in, and that's what courage is about. And is it scary? And yeah, sometimes. And is it time-consuming? Yeah. And we may be criticized for it, and people may retaliate, but whether it's genocide on the far side of the world, or if it's poverty and racism or whatever you may have here in the United States, I mean, we gotta fight it.
Well, the only reason why I asked that question in particular, because there's another situation in regards to a story that just broke today in Las Cruz, the Tea Party in New Mexico. At the 4th of July, they had a float with the Confederate flag that won first place for their 4th of July celebration. And it just seems to me that, although I understand where you're coming from, I mean, I know this is not just isolated here in America, but it just seems like it is just a definite sign that, for blacks, we've always shined a light on the issues. You can look at the statistical numbers. We've been advocating statistically, the injustices that have been done towards us, and yet we still see no change coming from white people in general. And, I think that's where my greatest concern is. So that's all.
No, I mean, I understand your frustration. I don't have an answer. I mean, all I know is my parents taught me that to fight for those that can't fight for themselves, or fight for those that need help. And I don't think we can stop whether it's black people being abused, or whether it's Hispanic folks being abused, or white folks being abused. If there's abuse and injustice going on, then we as a society and as human beings need to voice our concern and fight it. And it's difficult, and it's very difficult, and it's tiring. It drains you financially, spiritually, mentally, but we got to do it, because if we don't, we look the other way, things get worse, and we don't need to go back to where we came from. We don't need to go back to the 60s and the 50s and the 40s and those times when race was really a problem. So when it pops up, we got to fight it and call it out, at least in my opinion.
Thank you for your time, sir.
Thank you.
Context of White Supremacy. If you have a question, you should get your hand up now. Don't want to wait till last minute. Have our guest with us, Mr. Byrd, maybe another 5 minutes. So get your hand up right now if you think you have a question, something you want to ask. The number is 760-569-7676. and the code is 564943 pound. If you're on that line and you have a question, *6. If you're on the TalkShoe line, it is *8. Get your hand up now if you think you have a question. Also, I wanted to ask, we began the program and I gave my definition for white supremacy racism, and you said that racism in all forms, whether it's white on black racism, black on white racism, and that's something we talk about consistently on this program. It's being asserted more and more frequently, where I'm hearing people say that, well, we got some black racists. That I think they've been saying that. Mayor Loughton Company saying that the former council members, they were racist. That's how Chief Pearson got that position in the first place, because we had some racist black council members who did not pick the best candidate. They just picked a black person. How does a black person practice racism against a white person?
Wow, that's deep. I don't know. It's tough. I mean, I think that's a tough question. You just got to look at someone's heart. You know, if people make decisions toward other human beings, negative decisions, or make decisions that will hurt other human beings based on the color of their skin, then I don't think that's right, no matter who it is. Now, unfortunately, there's some people that say anytime black Americans talk about racism and the problems with race, that they themselves must be racists, and I don't think that's right at all. You know, and but I mean, I think that there's probably racists of all creeds and colors. I mean, I think that that's just probably human nature. But unfortunately, the black community in the United States, the history has been that they have been a very they've been oppressed throughout our history, and I think that a lot of people don't like to think about that. It's not comfortable, and so they don't. You know, they act like nothing. You know, they want to forget where we came from, and I don't think you can ever forget where we came from. We need to remember where we came from so we don't repeat those mistakes in the future.
Has a black person ever practiced racism against you?
Not that I know of. I don't think so. I hope not.
What you're an attorney, so you know words and definitions very important.
Right.
What is your definition for racism?
Deep questions. I think that if you make decisions to harm someone, whether financially, physically, emotionally, out of hate in your heart, because of they're different than you are, whether it's religiously or color-wise or whatever, to me that's racism. And you know, I think in any form it's wrong. But you know a lot more about the topic than I do. I'm just learning. I'm a young lawyer, so I don't pretend to be an expert on it at all.
Oh, I'm no expert on racism. I had to tell someone that on Saturday. I've never claimed to be an expert on racism. I'm still learning myself.
Okay.
Yeah, that I did. I was writing your definition down. I paraphrased, but I think I got it pretty close. You said if you make decisions to harm someone else because they are different than you, and you were saying that could be religion, skin color, etc. Is that accurate? Is that true?
I think so.
Okay.
That's a great question. I hadn't really ever thought about what my own definition of it was.
Again, you're an attorney. Words are very important. Definitions very important, particularly in pursuit of justice. I would tell our listeners out there, I would just say, I think the evidence speaks for itself. I would say worldwide. We've been mostly talking about Jasper, Texas, and the U.S., but I would say worldwide. I think the record speaks for itself. Black people, we are not in positions to make decisions to harm white people. I don't see that happening. I see, whether we're talking about Jasper or worldwide, it tends to be that white people are the ones who are in positions where they can make decisions to harm people, whether it's based on skin color or whatever. I don't see very many black people. In fact, you said the black people in Jasper, they're even scared to speak out about this incident because they're scared white people have a lot of power and they can make decisions to harm them economically, fire them, cause them to lose their home or their jobs, their businesses. I think it's obvious. I think it's obvious. It's self-evident that white people are the ones who are in position of power. They're the ones who can make those decisions to harm you if you are a black person. Is what I'm saying, is that accurate?
There's a lot of truth to what you say, yeah. I mean, I don't think you have to be in a position of power to be a racist. I think you can be a lowly, you can be a nobody, and if you've got that hatred in your heart, then you may not. It could be just a comment that you say, or it could be an attitude that you have. So I don't think you necessarily have to be, I guess, in a powerful position. But historically, you're right. I mean, it is what it is, So that's a great question, though. My definition is subject to further revision.
Attorney. Wow. I would even use the example that you brought up at the very beginning of the program. You referenced President Obama. Allegedly, this would be a non-white person, black person, who's in the most powerful position in this area of the world, and it doesn't look like he's practicing racism. It looks like he's the victim of racism on an everyday basis, being interrupted and calling him names, his wife names, his children's name. It just looks like white people practicing racism against him on a constant basis.
He's been horribly attacked. He and his family. It's really. Some of the stuff that's going on is just disgusting. There's no doubt about that.
Self-evident. I'm assuming folks are good. Questions, I don't see any hands. When do you know the process, just so that we can kind of keep an eye out on this whole case? Do you know what the timetable is going to be looking like?
Yeah, we've got to amend our EEOC complaint and then hopefully bring a lawsuit against the city sometime this fall, I would imagine, or late summer. And so, we would definitely love you to follow it, and I can, let you know what's going on, because the story and the saga is not over yet.
I would definitely appreciate that, to kind of be kept up to speed. I'm sure listeners would as well. Like, what is the timetable? If you're saying
we don't really know. We have to. The process is kind of slow. We have to file an amended complaint with the EEOC, and then they give you a right to sue letter, and then you have 90 days after you get that letter to file suit, which it won't take us 90 days to do it. So as soon as we get that letter, we'll go. You just don't know when they're going to do it. They have to investigate it.
The EEOC?
The EEOC is supposed to investigate it, yeah.
Okay. Have they begun the investigation, to your knowledge?
As far as I know, they have, yes. But I don't really know what they've done. Okay.
And I guess if the result of this litigation comes out the best possible way that you could imagine, would that be financial compensation for Mr. Pearson, acknowledgement of racism? Like, what would be the best possible result for you in this case?
Yeah, I think financial compensation for the chief and his family and the nightmare they've had to live through, and hopefully that it would send a message to other places, Jasper included, that this kind of behavior is not right, it's not acceptable, and that the nation is watching, and that we're not, as a community, as a society, we're not going to put up with it.
We'll definitely be keeping my eye on what's taking place. I was looking while we were talking during the program. Man, this is, I put it in the chat room. You all can check for yourself. The website is gunslinger1.com. That's the website for Lance Caraway. Man, just check out the website. They've got images and graphics, the whole nine. Lance Caraway is the racist suspect who owns the gun store, who had the nigger Facebook postings, and who made the comment, "There's no dark, secret, heinous wish for anybody to die." Just check his website out. It's in the chat room, gunslinger1.com. That'll give you some info about what the mind state that's operating in Jasper, Texas. Again, attorney Cade Bernsen, our guest for the program. Real pleasure to have you on the program. Was unfortunate circumstances, but I definitely am grateful for the chance to get more information about what's been happening down there, and definitely I will be following the story to see how things transpire.
Well, thank you for having us, and thank you for caring.
Absolutely. Give our best to Mr. Pearson as well. I know, I can't even say that. I can only imagine how difficult it has been. I hope that he can maintain his strength, and I hope he gets a massive settlement from the city of Jasper to compensate him for some of the strife that he's had to endure.
Thank you very much.
Absolutely. Take care, sir.
You too. Bye-bye.
Outstanding. Context of White Supremacy. Man. Trifling down in Jasper. What to say? We will take a quick commercial break, be back, see if anybody has any closing comments to get in before we wrap things up. Check out the website. It's in the chat room. Again, it is gunslinger1.com. Make sure you look at some of the images. You might have to scroll down a little bit. You won't see the full force of what they got on this website unless you scroll down. So make sure you go down the page. Some background noise. Yeah, make sure you scroll down the page a little bit to make sure that you see all of the tackiness that is on display on the website. I don't even know what. I feel like I need to send that to Dr. Welsing so that she's aware of all that. Anywho, we'll be right back. We'll take our quick commercial break. Context of White Supremacy.
RacismDaily.com, your number one source for global news reports on race, racism, and overt actions of white supremacy. From Asia to the Americas to Europe to Australia to Africa, racism is not a thing of the past. It is our current reality. Be informed. Be globally informed. You should be the first to know. RacismDaily.com, RacismDaily.com, RacismDaily.com.
Is racism hurting you? On issues of race, are you unable to speak, think, and act with clarity and confidence? Are you tired of laughing when nothing is funny, smiling when you are not happy, agreeing when you really disagree? At counterracism.com, you can learn specific strategies and techniques to counter the behaviors of the people who practice racism in all areas of activity, using words correctly, following counter-racist logic, even counter-racist science projects designed to reveal what racism is, how it works, and how to counter it. The open-source code writing format allows you to pick and choose from a variety of counter-racist suggestions so you can produce the code that works for you. Stop by counterracism.com today and help replace racism with justice.
That's counter-racism.com.
Do you need a one-stop shop for all of your multimedia needs? Triumphant Multimedia is a skilled team of professionals with a passion for great marketing and chic design. Our specialties include consulting, brand development, copywriting, and creative graphic design that's second to none. We also offer photography, photo retouching, videography, and video editing. At Triumphant Multimedia, our goal is to provide highly effective creative solutions built to suit any individual need or budget. Give us a call at 678-732-8067 or check us out online at trimultimedia.com.
everyone, welcome. This is Justice with the C.O.W.S radio program. If you want to learn about, understand, and counter racism, white supremacy, be sure not to miss a C.O.W.S episode. We keep them jammed, packed with constructive information to sharpen your use of words to help eliminate the system of racism, white supremacy, ASAP. Also, to be able to invest in my counter-racist efforts, co-hosting the C.O.W.S radio program, please visit my blog, justdojusticetoday.blogspot.com.
You're just saying just buckets and buckets of words.
I got an uncle real crazy. My Uncle B, 55 years old, hates white people, married to a white lady. And he's sitting around going, these crackers ain't shit, except for Susan. And he tried to explain the whole thing to me one day, say, yeah, I got a white wife, I love her, she love me, that's all that matter. But I tell you this, if the revolution ever come, I'll kill her first. Just to show these crackers I mean business. Motherfucking cracker ass, motherfucking cracker. Shit, cracker, motherfucker. Hey, hi, honey. Motherfucking cracker, I'll kill my cracker kids, too.
New at 10, some bitter words between the Las Cruces mayor and the city's Tea Party over a parade float.
The Tea Party's float for the light parade on July 3rd displayed a Confederate flag. Here's a photo of the float. It won the Best of Show. This outrage, Mayor Ken Miyashima, he released this statement, quote, the Las Cruces Tea Party can believe whatever it wants, but to have this symbol and what it represents, highlighting the winning float at a celebration of our nation's independence, is an outrage.
The Tea Party responded to the mayor saying, quote, the theme of the parade was the history of the state of New Mexico. There was a lot of history that defined our state prior to 1912. We showed how we fought for our statehood and the sacrifices we made along the way, along with our triumphs, end quote.
Context of White Supremacy. Man, that is why I played Dixie so much on the program. Right there, 4th of July, we are rocking the Confederate flag, letting them know how we get down. And it won first prize. That right there, another example of why Dixie has played so many times on the program. That is the theme song. Racist man, racist woman, racist child. If you want another comparison, I think it's great sometimes to kind of juxtapose current events. You just heard Chris Rock in the sound clip. All of the attention that got focused on him for his tweets about the slaves maybe enjoying the fireworks for the 4th of July, but that's about it, right? All of the attention that got focused on that, how much attention did you hear get focused on them having the Confederate flag as the winning float? This was the first I heard of it. The caller mentioned it, and this happened on July 3rd. So, I mean, even, if it's breaking today, it's July 9th. So we're still a little late. They were on that Chris Rock thing immediately. I think on some of the websites, they had over 10,000 comments where people, many of them white folks, ranting and raving and talking about how he's not a patriot and he's a racist and he's an ungrateful Negro. That's basically what they were saying. This ungrateful nigger, how dare he come out and talk bad about our holiday, quote unquote, all the money that we've allowed him to have. He should be the happiest nigger on the plantation. That's about the gist of what they were saying. Comparison, contrast. Anywho, I hope people will share. I think this is just a really, I think it's a great illustration. The Voltron effect. He said the white people came to the council meeting with scripts prepared to say. I was cracking up. I mean, you can't write this sort of stuff. I hope people, recognize, as I've said, when you're dealing with a racist man, racist woman, racist child, they are going to coordinate, synchronize their effort. That is one of the main advantages that they have. They have got a team. When Mr. Fuller says there's one race, that is a demonstration of how a race operates. We meet, we get together, we get on the same page, we get on the same syllable with regards to what we are going to say and what we are going to do to dominate and terrorize non-white people. Phenomenal illustration, in my view, the whole sorry case. And I would have to recognize Racism Daily again, because I had been seeing this for about a year, that this has been going on all the way back to when he was first hired as chief in 2011. I had been seeing, if you look on Racism Daily, in June of last year, he was writing with these white people. You got names and everything. Michael G. McConnell was one of them who filed a complaint and said that he was filing a grievance because it was racism. He wasn't hired. He was the best candidate, and they hired this black guy who was incompetent, wasn't the best candidate. This has been going on for a year. Just paying attention to the news. So that was number one. When I saw it recently, when he actually was terminated, Mr. Pearson, and CNN did the story, New York Times did the story, where I recognized that this has just been a long, ugly drama that has been going on for more than a year now. Anywho, if you want to check out any of the reports, I would definitely recommend that New York Times piece. It's Fired Jasper Police Chief is at Center of Divide. Title again, Fired Jasper Police Chief is at Center of Divide. It's on the New York Times. It was published June 21st. It's the equinox. June 21st, 2012. Not very long, but it has a lot of great information. That's the one where it begins talking about Mr. Pearson. He wasn't able to go to the Jasper Country Club because they didn't allow black people. This is in 1992, and it goes on to give more information later down the page. Lance Caraway, his comment about there not being any dark, secret, heinous wish for anybody to die. Lance Caraway, the owner of the gun store, he said the biggest gun store in Jasper, gunslinger1.com. You got to look at that website to really get the full appreciation for how much is being revealed about the Asili of racist man, racist woman, racist child, white people in general. You got to look at the website, gunslinger1.com. Look at the website. They got it looks like a white 2-year-old with a gun. I said I need to send this to Dr. Welsing. Anyway, yeah, I'm glad we were able to do it. I would also encourage folks, if you are not informed about James Byrd Jr., perhaps invest some time in checking out those documentaries. Two Towns in Jasper, great film, PBS. They generally have great documentaries that reveal a lot about racism. Two Towns in Jasper is an excellent one. That's where you got that clip of the white family sitting around and talking about how sad they are that they can't say nigger anymore. And the other one is the documentary film Sued. Got that last year preparing for Dick Gregory to be a guest on the program, and I was trying to get more details about what happened in Jasper. And yeah, Austrian filmmaker. And to me, that is extremely embarrassing, indicative of the world in which we live. You got somebody who's on the other side of the planet. She was coming here to do a documentary film on William Faulkner, and she gets here and is like, what? They drug a black male and decapitated him? Jesus, I need to switch my film effort and talk about that. And so she ends up going to Jasper and doing her whole film on that. And I mean, she doesn't even talk. She just puts the camera down and lets people say whatever they want to say. She goes to a church. So that actually was kind of difficult to watch, seeing the black people in the church. I think Blacka had voiced some... he was a bit disheartened upon hearing that segment as well. But yeah, it was pretty tough to see the black people into Yurugu again, that universality and the humanity, and we're all a part of the human brotherhood and sisterhood, and we're all in this together, and we love everyone, white people and black people. And it was pretty difficult to watch. But other than that, I think it has a lot of great info just about the town in general, and just hearing people talk about the legacy of racism, white supremacy in that area. It's Sued, S-U-D, in 1999. Dig around for it. It's online. Excellent film, as well as Two Towns in Jasper. We'll check. We will be back on Wednesday. Make sure I get that in as well. Wednesday, July 11th. As I said, this, I reckon, is Sexual Molestation Month here on the Cows, and hopefully getting out more information about how prevalent this is, and the fact that you should be talking to your children, really any non-white people that you have concern for, talking about this on a regular basis, especially your children. hopefully giving out some information and resources to help anyone if they've been victimized in that way, to kind of help them deal with the trauma from that experience, as well as just, as I said, hopefully having more people recognize what a major problem this is, in the cesspool that has been created by a racist man, racist woman, racist child. This Wednesday, Valerie Jackson, white woman, she'll be joining us live from the United Kingdom. Her book, Racism and Child Molestation. I am fascinated to hear why a white woman would choose to write a book on black people and sexual molestation. She said that they actually, shared with her. She went and interviewed a lot of black people who were victims, and they, just kind of shared some of the details of what they experienced and all that. But she'll be here on Wednesday. I reckon it would be Wednesday afternoon. Time difference, it'll be earlier because, she's in the UK. So 3 p.m. Eastern, 2 p.m. Central, and 12 noon Pacific. Valerie Jackson, looking forward to hearing. That'll be back-to-back days on sexual abuse. This program on Thursday, Amos Camille, he did the New York Times Magazine piece, Prep School Predators, that came out just a few weeks ago. Came out in June. Also a very disturbing piece where there was a long legacy, decades, where they allowed teachers at this expensive prep school in New York were molesting the children. The staff, same thing at Penn State. Staff was being notified about it. They didn't do anything. This really bad. Even when one of the pedophiles, when he was ready to retire, some of the victims, they were older now, a considerable amount of time had passed. So some of the older victims, they're adults, and they said, well, we don't think it's correct for you to have some sort of mass celebration for this guy. He's a pedophile. He was molesting students, and we don't think that's the correct thing to do. He's retiring, let him go, and let's just try to resolve this situation in the best way possible. And the officials went ahead. They had this lavish party for him at the New York Athletic Club. For folks who don't know, that's where every year they give out the Heisman Trophy Award at the New York Athletic Club. So they get this pedophile. He gets a big party over there to celebrate his years of service and molestation of children at this prep school. Horace Mann, that's the name of the school. But that'll be Thursday. He'll be with us Thursday evening. Sexual Abuse Month here on the Cows. We'll have more programs on that. As we proceed with the month, we'll check in, see if anybody has anything they would like to share. Check the caller 8286. You should be there as well. If y'all had anything you all wanted to share, feel free.
Can I be heard?
Yep.
Oh, okay. No, I was just intrigued overall. I had came in later into the discussion. I was just getting into the house, but I was just intrigued by his answers towards the end. And it's a phrase that I hear a lot of white people say in reference to determining how a person can harbor hate in their heart. And my question I would leave to listeners as well as white people in general is there a measurement in which that you use to measure how much hate somebody can harbor in their heart? How can you actually measure that? For him as a lawyer, I think that would be a question. That's something that he would definitely have to be very precise about, because that's a very vague phrase to use in regards to talking about, something that's precise like we discuss about racism, white supremacy. It doesn't specify specifically racism, white supremacy. So I just wanted to throw that out there.
I think that is very important point. I would say keep in mind, he is a white person. He said that. I'd ask folks that. That's generally one of the first questions that gets asked when we have guests on the program. For folks, I know some people have said, Gus, I've heard you and Justice and callers, I've heard you all go at white people when you have them on the program, and then other times you'll have white people on and you don't do that. This is one of those situations where I just want the information. I've already given my view repeatedly on what I think it means to be a white person, no exceptions. However, in my view, the point of counter-racism is you have an objective in mind. What is it that you're trying to do? And my objective with having our guest on, Cade Bernsen, was to get as much information as I could about this incident, not so much to, try to ask any questions or reveal truth about the fact that he is a white person and how he most likely is practicing racism, white supremacy. That said, I would say that right there is huge. Just his definition of racism, him saying, don't you think I did not put a huge asterisk down when he said at the beginning, racism, I think white people practicing racism against black people practicing racism against white people. If he didn't have all that information, if you don't think he shared anything constructive, that's fine too. But I thought it would be important to get all that info that we got. Had I just been talking to a regular white person where I had no objective to get anything from them, that would have been huge. Just him saying that black people can practice racism against white people, and the whole concept about hate. I think Dr. Welsing, she's commented on that many times, saying that it's not about hate. When you're talking about racism, white supremacy, we're not talking about quote-unquote hate crimes. We're not talking about somebody having bad feelings towards someone. We're talking about decisions to mistreat and harm someone based on someone not being white. Being very precise with terms and definitions, as you said. So, yeah, and even when I asked him his definition for racism, he didn't include hate. The definition that I wrote down and I read it back, he said if you make decisions to harm someone because they are different than you, that doesn't really, mean that you have any quote-unquote hatred or dislike. You're just making decisions to harm someone because they are different, however you classify that difference, racially or whatever. He mentioned religion and some other things. So yeah, I would say that right there is incredibly suspicious and something, if you're a non-white person, you really got to be on your guard about that. Just having your own definition for racism clear in your mind, and then being hyper vigilant that white people are going to directly and or indirectly assert that non-white people can be racist, or they're going to give you very vague definitions of racism. And I think he said that his definition was kind of vague and was subject to revision. I think he said that with a chuckle at the close. So yeah, very important point from our female caller.
No, I concur. I totally agree. And it's good information to know. It just struck me as strange, him being a lawyer, and then when Justice was asking some of the questions, it's almost as if he was being deceptive with her, and just actually listening and seeing it play out is just fascinating.
Generally is.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Hello? Hello?
Yeah, you can be heard.
Oh, okay. I just wanted to point out as well, and I had written down a few questions, but unfortunately he left. He did answer no when asked whether or not he thought a system of white supremacy could ever stop. And I would be curious to know whether he can picture himself in a world like that and how he would feel in a world like that. I also suspect at one point during the conversation he became a little tired and fatigued with the conversation. And I think that it is really hard to end a conversation about system of white supremacy with a white person without making them feel good in a lot of the times. And I could be wrong, but that's all I have to say.
Just maybe my brain is shutting down. I'm trying to make sure I processed it correctly. You said when that it's difficult to conclude a conversation on white supremacy, racism with a white person without making them feel good. Did I hear correctly?
That's what I said. I guess, like, for example, if you were to be in one of your normal Gus moods and you were throwing all these, questions at him and stuff, would he become more fatigued? Would you guys have been all, tacky at the end of the conversation like you were? That's kind of my question. Does that make sense?
I'll repeat it back. You can let me know if I'm understanding what you said. If it had been a conversation where he had been challenged more, where if there was a greater effort made to question things that he was saying and to point some suspicion at him as being a white person and most likely being a racist white supremacist, that it would have probably ended with him being either one, he would have gotten fatigued with the conversation quicker, and or it would have been less cordial by the end of the discussion. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, basically. I think it's really important in these conversations to WP to be able to save face in every situation and always feel good about their contribution at the end of the day. You know what I mean?
That I think
regardless of whether or not, yeah.
You said regardless of
whether or not that is productive and constructive.
That it makes sense. I think my brain computer was just slowing down a little bit. That makes sense. I think Blacka and some of the other listeners, they have pointed that out, that they think a lot of the white people that come on the program or have come on the program, that they think that they are going to be greeted by black people who are just elated with them and are just ready to praise and admire them for being white people who allege to be against racism, and they are stunned when they come and they don't get that, and that they end up being really disgusted with the fact that they're not getting that praise and admiration from black people. I think that is very important. Even if you're talking to a white person and you have an objective in mind, so you're doing whatever you do using words to get information, just even if, just on a personal level, keep that in mind. If you're talking to a white person, you should be suspicious. Even if your words do not reveal your suspicion, the suspicion should be there. If they are a white person, they're probably going to say something, do something to evidence their allegiance to the white supremacist army. Got to be on your toes. But yeah, I think a lot of non-white listeners have noted that. Absolutely.
I had a question for you, Gus. Do you think he made a reference a couple of times? I guess each time we were asking him questions, he made a comment in saying these are tough or deep questions. And I've always taken that as, a signal for me if it's something that hits home. I just noticed that he kept on saying that towards the end. So it was questions that were direct that made him feel uncomfortable. And like the caller said, towards the end of the conversation, if we're engaged in a dialogue that tends not to be conforming to white people, they start to get tired or uncomfortable throughout the dialogue, and you can hear him throughout the conversation referencing, the way he was saying some of the stuff, saying we just got to keep on keeping on, but it was as if, sounded like he was out of breath. It wasn't like he had anything to back it, so to speak. I just thought that was interesting.
Yeah, he said deep quite a few times towards the latter portion of the program before he gave his response. Like, oh, that's deep. And he would take his time to try to get his response. Yeah, I thought that was, and I think one of his suggestions was prayer, about ways to go about ending the system, and he said to pray. That was another one. I was glad I was muted. Yeah, I think we have prayed ourselves out. Not that I'm saying don't pray. Hopefully we'll do our prayer to wrap things up today. But man, a white person telling any group of non-white people, or an individual non-white person that their first suggestion on countering racism, white supremacy being to pray.
Wow, I didn't hear that. I missed that part.
Even that, I suspect Dr. Welsing would have probably had quite a bit to say about that. Like, you're an attorney fighting a case where you're alleging racism and going to the EEOC, and you don't have a solid definition of racism? Like, what the hell? I think Dr. Welsing would have.
That's exactly what I was thinking. Like I said, I had gotten fired from my job, and when I had to go through the EEOC, I learned a lot. Really. I just look at the EEOC. If you don't have a lawyer, which in my case, I didn't. If you don't have a lawyer, you're just SOL in the whole process, because really, the EEOC is not set up for non-white people. It is set up for the corporations that they litigate for. Really. The only reason why, towards the end, my supervisor was fired was because, when you make a report to the EEOC, they get in contact with, the corporation that you're filing the complaint with. And because of the situation that happened on my job, they knew that I had went through the chain of command in trying to resolve the issue internally and locally, but they decided, Voltron, all the white people in the department decided to eliminate me. They designated me as the problem. It backfired on them in the end, and basically they got rid of like 7 or 8 different departments besides me over the course of this year alone. But I'm still out of a job. But I just find it strange, as him as a lawyer, that he didn't even have a definition for racism and racism, white supremacy, or just racism. It's just strange. It just goes to show what our people are up against, even in the court of law, even if we do have a chance. Troy Davis.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I know Mr. Fuller, I've heard him comment where he was talking about the EEOC, and he was saying he thinks it's set up like they must have some sort of computer lottery system set up where after every 689,000th complaint, that bang, you hit the lotto and woo, jackpot, black person will win a suit and get $50,000 or whatever, $1 million, and they'll put that on the front page of the paper and put it on CNN. EEOC awards, victim such and such amount of dollars, compensation, racism suit, and a lot of photography. But the other, 600,000 complaints for that year, nothing, just pass those on through. He said he thinks they got some sort of computer system all set up where they just punch it in and it just comes out randomly every once a year or once a blue moon. It'll come out and somebody will get some money from them.
Would not surprise me. And the only reason why I mentioned the case about the Confederate flag float in New Mexico is, it's, again, like you said, it is their dedication to maintaining the system of white supremacy. And every time I go out in public, and all I keep on thinking of is Justice's soundbite, you're just saying buckets and buckets of words. It's like now I don't even worry about listening to what white people say when I'm amongst them. I tend to my business and do what I need to do to get by, but It's just at the end of the day, they're just saying buckets and buckets of words.
About the size of it. I don't even think New Mexico was in the Confederacy. Like, I mean, we're just going on historical, being historically accurate. You know, why is it in New Mexico? I don't think they were fighting in the whole Civil War conflict. Anywho, dedication, ladies and gentlemen.
Well, I was trying to post something. Well, the chat room, I guess, is blocked right now. But if people can go on the Griot report, a few days ago, I meant to call in Saturday to put it on there. But on the Griot report, I guess the U.S. military is now starting to study black women to study to combat the suicide rates amongst white men. So it's like I was posting to someone, because they had it on CNN and stuff, and you were seeing, you know, black people or black women, you know, talking about how it's a good thing and this, that, and the other. And I'm just sitting up here looking like, why would you want to teach, you know, help white people, you know, teach them how to not. It was just crazy. But, you know, it just shows that, you know, we're still not understanding that these people, you know, are our enemy. And, you know, when you're at war with people, you're not going to teach them how to do warfare against you. It is, you know, inside trader secrets. You're not going to go to another company to tell them how you're doing things. Because then they're going to get the upper hand and beat you. And it's, you know, they're trying to do studies on black women so that way their white men don't commit suicide. It's like, haven't they taken enough from black women? They've been studying black women for a very long time. It's on the Griot report. I'm going to put it up here in a minute, though. I had it saved.
Yep, I'm not trying to help Lance Caraway and the rest of the white army. I'm not trying to help them out in any way, shape, or form. Don't help white people. We did 2 programs that time. Don't help white people. I mean, that is absurd. Yeah, you all should visit the mayor in Jasper, James Mike Lout. You should check out his website too. I'm trying to see if we can get him on the program. He has a radio program too. You can go to the website. It's kjas.com. kjas.com. Check the website and see their material. Very, very interesting info there as well. They have some news reports also on the case with Mr. Pearson. You can go and just check news. You can put his name in, Rodney Pearson, and they'll pop up. They had even news reports last year when all of this started, when he first got hired. But yeah, check the website for Mayor Lout as well as Mr. Caraway, gunslinger1.com, his website. They even, I think their slogan for their gun store is, if it shoots, we'll get it. That is white people.
Wow.
Man. Wow. Crazy. Make sure you visit the website. I'm not sending folks there with the intent of purchasing anything or what have you. Just, this is studying the other side of the chessboard. Yeah, visit their website and check them out. These look like some of the folks, NRA members, Charlton Heston and company. Man, that's stuff like that. That's why I think, if you go in letting white people know that you are less confused. You might not get information like that. And that I have not seen that reported, that the guy that made those comments calling Rodney Pearson a nigger on Facebook and having this photograph, which, I mean, just think about that, having a photograph with Michelle Obama, President Obama, Rodney Pearson, and some of these black former council members having a photograph with a condom and saying, man, their parents should have not had them. I mean, just think about that. This guy owns the biggest gun store in Jasper. And then he comes out and makes this comment to the New York Times, comes out and says, it's not like there's some dark, heinous secret to wish that black people were dead. And he owns a gun. I mean, just in context, think about all of that. But yeah, I didn't see that reported. They had his quote in the paper, but they didn't have the fact that this guy owns the biggest gun store in Jasper. That's, in my view, very relevant information. Anywho, if anybody has anything else they want to get in before we wrap things up.
I went on ahead and posted that article, and it's in the GRIO about the military studying black women. It's in there. Should be coming up shortly. My computer's running slow, so.
Right on. I'm looking in the chat room. I'll see if it loads. If it doesn't, if something happens where it doesn't load in the chat room, I'll post it on Facebook so that folks can get the information. The GRIO article on black women, black females being studied for depression to aid white people. If it doesn't post, I'll make sure I find it and put it in the Facebook group and on my Facebook page.
Okay.
For sure. But yes, we will be back on Wednesday. Earlier program, if you all have the ability, tune in live. If not, you can catch the archives. Valerie Jackson, suspected racist white female. She'll be visiting with us from the UK Wednesday afternoon, 3 p.m. Eastern, 2 p.m. Central, and 12 noon Pacific. Valerie Jackson, looking forward to hearing from her. Thanks everyone for tuning in. I hope it was constructive. More than anything, I hope a demonstration of the Voltron effect. That those small towns, I think Mr. Fuller talks about that all the time. The small towns, the backbone of white supremacy. You can learn a lot. Oh, it posted. Okay. The article's in the chat room for folks. But yeah, those small towns, they reveal a lot about the workings of the system of white supremacy. In fact, in my view, where I've heard a lot of folks, they say that they think it's just the small elite, the really wealthy white people, they're the ones who are running all this. I don't think that's the case at all. I think it is those rank and file, the little itty bitty white people down in places like Jenna and Jasper. Those are the people that are responsible for this whole thing running. If they did not have, because you've got way more of them, it's not that many white people to begin with. If you did not have hordes of those types of white people who are not rolling with all kinds of mega millions of dollars in their little itty bitty towns with less than 10,000 people, if you did not have hordes of white people like that worldwide who were dedicated to the system of white supremacy, we would not have this problem. Those people, in my view, that is the backbone of white supremacy, and it evidences dedication. It evidences what it means to be white. You don't have to be mega billionaire to be vested in white supremacy. You can be making a relatively small amount of income, and I'm talking about quote unquote cash, but the benefits, the desire to practice and participate in the system of white supremacy is way beyond what white people can stuff into their wallets, way beyond, and we do not understand that at all. White people can cause a variety. Go to gunslinger1.com. There you go. Just visit the website. Largest gun store in Jasper, Texas. Gunslinger1.com. And then make sure you tie that with the New York Times article. Fired Jasper police chief is at center of divide. Even that title right there, that is another pattern where it gets focused on the black person. He's not at the center of the divide. White people are at the center of this divide. It's people like Mr. Caraway and Mayor Lout. They are at the center of this quote-unquote divide, practicing racism, white supremacy. At any rate, we'll be back Wednesday. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in to the program. Visit everybody's websites, justdojusticetoday.blogspot.com, justdojusticetoday.blogspot.com. You can visit my blog as well, racism-notes.blogspot.com. Oh, wow, they got an article on Jack Johnson. That would be Cowbell Ring 2. Article on Jack Johnson. I'm going to check that out now that the program. So it's a century later, Galveston's nod to Jack Johnson. If you want to read it on the New York Times, a century later, Galveston's nod to Jack Johnson. Cowbell Ring. Man, I cannot even imagine the trauma that Mr. Pearson is going through, being married to a white woman, going through all of this. Man, I feel sorry for him. We'll be back on Wednesday. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. It has been time. Replace white supremacy with justice immediately. Context of White Supremacy, signing out.